I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. She yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very important hearing. I appreciate you holding this. And also, I want to thank the ranking member, and thanks for the testimony as well from the panel. As we kick off hurricane season this month, I'm reminded of the all too familiar situation for residents in my state of Florida. The electric is out, the internet is down, the cell phone coverage is shoddy at best. And if people heard my PSAs over the years, they would know to have an emergency handheld radio at the ready. But if not, they head to their cars to reestablish a connection to their community, hear about the devastation of the storm, and heed any direction from emergency services, service authorities. So my first question is to the Lieutenant Colonel, what benefits do AM signals have over FM signals during and in the aftermath of a natural disaster such as a hurricane?
AM signals in and of themselves have much broader reach, as mentioned before in prior testimony here today, that they can reach greater distances than the FM signals can. So we can penetrate some of those more rural areas, but also, as mentioned, the ability to also penetrate buildings within some of those urban centers makes it certainly a little bit more amenable to those types of messaging.
Very good, thank you. In 2016 legislation I authored to modernize the FEMA's iPod system became law. That legislation improved the effectiveness of the texting system for future emergency situations and implemented training requirements for state officials. It also relied heavily on the emergency alarm system and AM radio signals to work quickly and effectively. So again, Lieutenant Colonel, in your professional capacity, do you foresee potential delays to emergency information getting to citizens as a result of lesser access to AM radios? And is it possible to replicate our EAS system without the use of AM signals? And this is so very important, as you know. I mean, we could lose lives without the AM radio. So please, if you could respond to that, I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, so I would agree that to lose the access to AM radio signals certainly would impede the messaging getting out. Whether it is a cellular network collapse, a power outage that impacts the cellular infrastructure, the potential is that those messages in text form would be cached and not delivered directly to the people that might need them. Certainly, we need all platforms available to our residents because some people are more comfortable listening to AM radio stations to obtain their information. And we want to have all messaging platforms available. So any delays in getting that message out in that critical moment certainly could be a matter of life and death as a part of the emergency alert system.
Absolutely. And then getting into the entertainment aspect, people are used to, particularly in the rural areas, and I represent rural areas, not all of my district, but quite a bit, 2 counties, and the people are used to listening to AM radio. That's where they get their news. And I tell you what, if we don't save AM radio, Mr. Chairman, I tell you what, it would be very devastating for a lot of people, particularly our seniors. And I'll add that I love to listen to AM radio, listen to baseball games. Radio is, actually baseball is a radio sport if you can't go to the game. So that's from a selfish point of view. But in any case, this is a serious issue, and I really appreciate you having this hearing. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, but I think your team's doing better than it did last year.
My team is doing pretty well. 2 first-place teams, the Rays and the Pirates.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the, I get in order here, let's see here, the gentlelady from California's 16th district for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for holding this hearing today. Thank you to the witnesses. There's no question that many Americans value AM radio, which is why it's been a standard feature in cars for so many years. While drivers now have several options for listening to music, podcasts, and other entertainment while driving, the backlash to Ford removing AM radio, which they've now walked back, shows there's still really robust consumer demand for this feature. Just as importantly, I think this episode shows that automakers are responsive to the demand. That's how the free market is supposed to work. While there are many features that drivers may want in their cars, the only ones mandated by the federal government are those intended to keep us safe. Two of the witnesses today have endorsed legislation mandating AM radio as a safety feature to ensure the public can receive emergency alerts during natural disasters and other emergencies. NHTSA has more than a dozen outstanding safety regulations mandated by Congress that it has yet to implement, and some of them have been pending for more than a decade. I think the Energy and Commerce Committee needs to get after NHTSA. Before we add to that list, I think we need to be sure that any additional mandates are truly needed to improve safety and save lives on the road. To Colonel DeMays, is AM radio the only means for or primary means by which drivers can receive emergency alerts through the integrated public alerts and warning system?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. They can receive messaging through the FM system as well, and also if they have a cellular device available to them, certainly they can receive messaging through that platform as well.
Thank
the
you.
Wireless emergency alert system.
Thank you. To Mr. Schmidt, what are the potential unintended consequences of Congress mandating the use of a specific technology to receive emergency alerts?
Thank you for the question. Yes, as you're well aware, mandates and regulations are blunt instruments. And so it's important that we look at the cost and benefit over a future. And one of the things that FEMA has noted is that there is declining listenership. And part of the whole iPause system is looking at the future in terms of what new technologies are going to be able to supplement maybe AM, potentially in the future even replace AM, and also to deliver more effective alerts. So we are very technology agnostic in the sense that we are looking for delivering the alerts to our members, to our customers, as efficiently as possible, as broadly as possible, in the most efficient manner, and in a manner that's not going to decline in the future, and will provide the benefits well into the future. Thank you.
Is there this to any of the witnesses, is there a technology neutral approach Congress can take to ensure that all drivers have access to emergency alerts? Yes.
If Congresswoman, if I may answer that
Sure.
for a second. FEMA many years ago, as they were constructing the current model for the EAS plan, used AM radio stations, and I referenced this earlier, as the primary entry point. And they did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, we've already talked about the distances that AM radio stations travel, but it's also some of the characteristics. So in the event of a significant disaster that we haven't experienced, these stations reach more than 90% of the United States. So they're the central point. And so there's not another technology or another medium right now that's ready to step in and replace that.
Mm-hmm. Any other witness care to?
Congressman, I agree with this statement. It really is, as was mentioned, several witnesses today stating that it is the backbone of the emergency alert system. It's the most consistent, dependable platform with which we have to communicate with the public.
Yeah, I just kind of just make a mention that, my understanding from reading some of the FEMA documents is that the EAS system is a fairly cost-intensive system to maintain. And I think the key thing is how do we make that more cost-effective as we move forward? And as we look at technologies that may be declining, we need to find alternatives that can address that in a more cost-efficient manner and still deliver the safety benefits.
Why is it so expensive?
I don't know. I just noted it in there. Well, first off, I think the idea is that you have these hardened stations, and like I said, they're not just AM stations; they're other stations. And I don't have the specifics on that, but it is in their documents. And if you want, I can probably pull that reference and get it back to you, and that would be helpful.
I'd appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you to the witnesses. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady of the full committee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the announcement, Mr. Schmidt, in the announcement Ford made on May 23rd, they stated, quote, for any owners of 2023 Ford EVs currently without AM broadcast capability, we'll offer an over-the-air software update to make it available. How was Ford able to turn on AM broadcast capability with the flip of a switch while other car manufacturers are not?
Thank you for the question. Let me give you Ford's, what they told us, and I think they've mentioned this to the committee as well, because in their May 23rd announcement, CEO Jim Farley announced that after speaking with policy leaders about the importance of AM broadcast radio as a part of the emergency alert system, Ford decided to include it on all 2024 Ford and Lincoln vehicles. And for any owners of 2023 model year Ford EVs that did not initially offer AM radio, they will offer a software update. It's my understanding from discussions with Ford representatives that Ford started removing AM radio by disabling the software while they worked on a longer lead time modification that would actually remove the hardware. So for those models, Ford can enable the AM radio via the over-the-air update. However, I can't really speak to any of the Ford's plans for post-2024 at this point.
Are you aware of any other auto manufacturers who are choosing not to provide AM radio despite having the technology and the capability to do so?
We haven't done a census to see which vehicle manufacturers are or not. This has been something that manufacturers look at customer preferences very closely, and so they do a lot of market research and try to determine how to deliver the most value to the customers.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the companies in your group plan to charge extra for AM/FM radios in cars through a subscription service?
Yeah, I really can't talk about, content. I talk about safety. And so we're committed to providing free alerts. As far as the content, there's, as you know, in this realm, there's a lot of free content, a lot of subscription content for everything. So again, that's a consumer preference, a marketing thing that our manufacturers look at. But I can say that we reaffirm that we are committed to ensuring drivers have access to free public alerts and safety warnings through the iPOS system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chapman, a large portion of the most popular AM radio shows feature either conservative or religious content. From your perspective, what effect will the removal of AM radios from cars have on the diversity of thought in the broadcasting space?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. I'll pull on a couple of examples. I have a station in Muncie, Indiana. It's WMUN. We recently reprogrammed this station. It's somewhat cost-intensive, but we focus on local community issues. It's important that we have a place for the Fourth Estate to act, to talk about public issues. Like a lot of the communities in the Rust Belt, this town has been somewhat challenged over the years, but if there's not the place with the declining forms of other media to discuss these things, we can't depend on social media to help a community shape its decisions. So it's a role that we need to play as a broadcaster, and that's something that AM stations do really well. I'd referenced a little bit earlier that when I was a general sales manager of an urban formatted station in Indianapolis, we worked very hard to address issues that were specific to our station and our audience. I've got a good friend who operates a radio station. He's a member of NABOB in Evansville, Indiana, at Lander, WEOA, and his station puts information out that would not be received by his listeners in that community because there are not other sources for it. So the diversity of voice and the diversity of thought is very important, and the AM band does that better than any of our other vehicles.
Thank you for those insights. Another question, the U.S. has invested significant capital into hardening certain AM radio broadcast stations to prepare for a variety of crisis scenarios. Can you speak to what goes into the process of hardening an AM station?
So thank you again for the question. As a general rule, each station, each opportunity for FEMA and that broadcaster is unique. For example, if it's a station that's on the Gulf, it might be on stilts and up in the air. If a hurricane comes through, that's to protect it, because in the past when that's happened, for example, during Katrina, stations were not able to stay on. So that investment has been made. Generally, with any PEP station, which is, again, the primary entry point, 30 to 60 days of alternate power are at each one of those facilities. So it's very different than a station in the Midwest that might be set up to survive some type of a terrorist act, such as an EMP or something like that. That's a lead-encased facility. So it depends on the radio station, and I know that's not a direct answer, but each one of these stations is somewhat different in terms of its requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. In times of emergency with the stakes so high, we can't ignore the fact that reducing the number of platforms and technologies available to us for warning the public makes the job of emergency managers and first responders that much more difficult. So let me ask Colonel DeMays, why is AM radio a critical piece of the public warning system in New Jersey, and why is it short-sighted to reduce the number of options available to public officials for communicating with the public in future disasters?
Thank you, Congressman. The redundancy as a major tenet of emergency management is something we try to focus in on. We need to have multiple platforms available to us, whether it's power delivery via generators or other sources of energy for homes, water, being bottled water, water buffaloes, et cetera. And from a communication standpoint, we want the maximum amount of platforms available that meets the users where they're at. The AM radio platform is, again, highly accepted by its audience and trusted, for that matter, and we want to communicate with those individuals through that platform if they're not maybe paying attention to those cellular platforms, television, et cetera. So we lose that connectivity with that very large audience during a crisis.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Let me go to Mr. Schmidt. I was glad to see you emphasize your member company's commitment to ensuring drivers access to free public alerts and safety warnings. I did not, however, hear a commitment to ensuring access to free information and entertainment like that currently enjoyed from broadcast radio. And while I appreciate those who point out that most radio stations are available to stream via apps on our phones or through the vehicles, these suggestions ignore a simple reality that not everyone has or can afford unlimited cellular data plans to support that level of sustained usage or additional subscriptions for their cars. So we don't want this to be another issue exacerbated by the digital divide. So my question, Mr. Schmidt, is how will people without unlimited data plans or paid auto connectivity subscriptions access broadcast radio content without the standard antenna in the vehicle?
Thank you for your question. Again, as I reiterate, consumers have never had so many choices in where they get their content and information, including alerts. I can't comment on necessarily what would be subscription or not subscription. However, I will say that our commitment is that there will be free options in that vehicle. And even within things that do have subscriptions, such as satellite, their alerts are free on their base channels. So they're provided without fee, even if you don't choose to subscribe. Thank you.
I mean, the problem, though, is that we know that with AM, it's essentially free. We don't know how people who of limited means are going to be able to use some of these other things that might have a subscription or, limit. They may not have unlimited cellular data plans. So I understand what you're saying, but I also think that, we have, in the case of broadcast radio and AM station, we know that that's not something they have to pay for. Let me go to Mr. Chapman. Can you describe what would happen if your business had to rely primarily on streaming broadcasts? How about the hardship streaming would place on working people who regularly tune into your stations while commuting to and from their jobs?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. A number of our listeners would no longer hear our stations. The easiest way to consume our product is free over-the-air radio. A streaming option is something that all of our stations have, but it's not that way for all broadcasters. There's a cost that goes with streaming. So for smaller broadcasters, for smaller operators, a standalone radio station, they may not have that option. So it would be a significant hit for our business. It would lower our reach, and we're talking about safety here. We're not as going to be accessible, but for some broadcasters, it would end their business model.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.